Hey, it's Lucera Boy, and I want to talk about how I was able to go from a part-time retail job to a full-time microbiologist. I made a lot of mistakes, and I wish I did things differently so I would be where I am now, but much sooner. I want to prevent people from getting a college degree and ending up in a dead-end job for years, because that's where I was. If this helps you out, leave a like and subscribe. Also, share this video with anyone who might also benefit. Going through high school, I didn't really have a plan for the future. Some people are lucky enough to find their passion or what they're interested in, but I just like playing video games and coasting by. I took on a recommended career path to be a doctor or a nurse. I wasn't so sure, but if I'm not going to have a direction, I might as well pick something. I highly recommend that if you do not know what you want to go to college for, to not go. You will save time, money, and hardship by having a thought-out plan with a career path rather than just winging it. I believe that taking 1 to 2 years just doing entry-level jobs in service or other quote high school jobs is more beneficial than jumping straight into college just because everyone else is doing it. You might actually find interest in skilled labor as an electrician, plumber, or welder. Without the cost of student loans, these career paths can actually be more profitable than investing in a bachelor's or even a master's degree. So after high school, I was still unsure, so I decided to go to community college and get an associate's in math and science. While there, I just went to school and worked part-time at a Lego store. I didn't do any activities or learn about other professions in the science field that might have interested me. After I graduated with my associate's degree, I was easily able to get into a university despite having below average SAT scores. There, I picked a major in general biology. I still didn't have a clear path, and I just thought it would work out and I'd become a doctor. The reason I picked general biology is honestly because I thought it would be easier than doing chemistry or microbiology or organic chemistry. University was significantly more difficult than I thought. The required liberal arts classes were easy, but the science and math classes were very difficult and I barely got by. Throughout all of it, I just coasted by while working at Lego. And again, I didn't get involved with any projects, connect with any professors or students, or look into career paths. By the time I was close to graduating, I knew I didn't have the drive to become a doctor. I graduated with a bachelor's in general biology in 2016, but really didn't have anything. After graduating, I continued working at the Lego store part-time, still as an associate, but with more availability. Around this time, I thought I might be able to cut it as a lab technician, so I started applying to many companies. I never got a response back, except from third-party hiring services. After a couple months, I gave up. And at some point, I was offered a supervisor position at Lego, so I took it. My parents were worried about my future and suggested I go back to school. I knew I couldn't cut it academically, especially if my heart wasn't in it. After a year with no job opportunities, I decided to enter a nursing program. I started with the determination to complete it and get a good job. I completed the first semester relatively well, especially since I only had to focus on nursing classes, and my bachelor's covered the rest. I already knew though it wasn't going to work out for me. The academic workload was more than I was willing to do, and the job itself, being at the bedside and interacting with patients, did not fit me well at all. How could I be a nurse if I didn't even like talking to people? I had too much respect and a high standard for the profession to continue with the program. Even if I completed it and got a job, I wouldn't be at the standard I believed anyone in that profession should be at. I later dropped out in the middle of the second semester. I was still working at Lego and decided that maybe I'll turn retail into a career because I couldn't do anything else really. Right after dropping out of the nursing program, I applied to GameStop because I wanted more retail experience. I knew the experience I was having at Lego was an outlier and not a good representation of what it was like being in sales. When I applied to GameStop, I was aiming to just be an associate. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, they hired me as a senior guest advisor, which is pretty much a key holder or supervisor. I thought it was a great opportunity to learn elsewhere and have an overall full-time-ish income. I did learn a lot at GameStop, and it gave me a better picture of what it meant to be in retail. However, because I was hired directly as a key holder, the learning curve was much higher and stressful. I did manage to do a decent job, but I was not near the level of performance that I was happy with. Every day was stressful, and I tried as hard as I could to meet the expectations. The coworkers I met were some of the hardest working people I've ever known. Everyone there deserved more, but they were all struggling financially despite the amount of work they did. I knew there was no future in GameStop, and it was negatively affecting my performance at LEGO. After 4 months, I quit to focus on LEGO instead. At LEGO, I took what I learned in GameStop and wanted to apply it in my store. GameStop measured employee performance through various metrics. They tracked how many new items you sold, how many pre-owned items you sold, how many trade-ins you took, and how many pre-orders you got. Every day this was tracked and you were expected to hit a certain number. This was a necessity for GameStop to survive. Without these metrics, the business may have collapsed a long time ago. Most retailers make close to 1% profit from selling goods, and the same is for GameStop. The majority of the profit was selling pre-owned items, and this was impacted by getting people to return to GameStop rather than buy games online or at Best Buy. If we could get people in the door, it meant they might buy pre-owned or trade in their items. Pre-orders was a way to guarantee that. LEGO stores, on the other hand, existed for brand recognition. Because LEGO controls the manufacturing and the distribution of their product, the profit margin was very high. As a result, sales were not the #1 priority at a LEGO store. Of course, the store should make enough to balance operating costs, but the focus was on guest experience and creating a connection between LEGO as a brand and its core values. Thus, employee metrics were not necessary. During this time, we got a new manager, and he was unsure on how to improve our store. He approached the team and wanted to improve sales and productivity. I pitched a couple of ideas, but we lacked the means to implement them because we had no tracking software like GameStop had. I dug around the operating end that supervisors and managers had access to and came up with several ways to track sales and performance. I still had to make a spreadsheet to analyze the data, but for now, I knew it was possible. My manager gave the task to me and would support me in any way he could for me to complete these projects. I always had an interest in Excel spreadsheets. I like figuring out problems and being able to analyze large amounts of data into something useful. I was also excited because by figuring out how to track certain metrics, I could objectively prove whether the changes we implemented were successful or not. Even though this was a part-time retail job, I found passion in it, something that I wanted to accomplish. I was able to track several things in the store. I was able to track productivity of shipment processing, the amount of certain items sold by employees, the amount of VIP memberships processed, and survey success rate versus transactions. In shipment productivity, I was able to calculate how many boxes per hour could optimally be processed, which supervisors were the most efficient, and what the number of payroll to employees were necessary to reach the optimal process rate. All of this reduced the amount of payroll used on shipment days and helped us develop better strategies when receiving shipments. One of the key metrics stores track is units per transaction. Success of a store can be illustrated by how many items customers buy per transaction. In order to increase this, we had to come up with a way to track and reward employees. We started by tracking the sale of reusable bags. A common belief is that no one wants to buy a reusable bag. Many of us would believe that most people would just take the free bag, especially if the reusable bags were between $1 and $10. I conducted a contest to see who could sell the most reusable bags in a month. What happened is 35% of all bag sales that year occurred in that 1 month. Every week I would update the display and it would show conversion percentage and total sold. So even if you had a few transactions, you could still win through conversion. I also found that the success rate of selling a reusable bag was 10%. So if an employee were merely to suggest purchasing a reusable bag, there was a 10% chance at success. I also did the same thing for VIP card signups. I tracked all employee conversion and total signups. VIP cards are important because it increases the likelihood of returning customers, and it was key to building a loyal consumer group. I was also able to analyze if store survey performance was on par with past performance. I tracked how often we would get completed surveys versus how many transactions were done. On the employee level, I tracked who got the most surveys. Through these various metrics, I was able to determine high performers, strategies that improved store metrics, and created a tool that could be used to improve individuals' performance. LEGO did not have any of these, but I was able to implement it in our store. GameStop had an automated system. In LEGO, I instead had to manually search up individual numbers and then create a spreadsheet that calculated the data and presented the numbers in a form that conclusions could be drawn from. I had a lot of fun solving these problems and implementing these solutions, and I really felt like I was doing something important. After about a year, I wasn't as optimistic as before. At the end of the day, I still didn't like retail. I felt most fulfilled working in the office on metric-based analysis, but that was only about 10% of my workload. I did learn what it meant to be a team leader, time management skills, and the implementation of change. All of this was learned not in school, but while working a retail job. And I believe these are the reasons I was able to move on to be a microbiologist. But first, I needed an interview. Around this point, I wasn't in the best mental state. I was depressed, unfulfilled, and unhappy at my potential future. One day after work, I ended up going to my coworker's party. I got really drunk and really just let all my emotions flow out to strangers. By morning, I was determined to get a new job in a lab. I started working on my resume. Before, it was empty. I didn't do any research, no projects, and no extracurriculars to make myself stand out. However, I did have everything I worked on while I was at LEGO. On my resume, I stated the various metric analysis I conducted, as well as specific numbers that illustrated improvement due to my interventions. I was very passionate about the work I completed, and I was excited to send out this resume. I then applied to 2 jobs, and then my life returned to normal, but with a little bit more hope. A couple weeks later, I received an email for a phone interview. During the phone interview, I emphasized how I barely knew any science because it's been so long since I graduated. They were very interested in my metric analysis, even though the position was for a microlab technician. Despite me saying how I knew nothing about microbiology, they wanted to bring me in for an in-person interview. I was excited and I wanted to prepare as much as possible. I actually went to work and printed out several pages that illustrated my data analysis as well as the outcome of those endeavors. At the interview, I was surprised. I thought I would interview in front of maybe 3 people, but instead I interviewed in front of the entire lab of about 10 people. I wasn't that nervous. I was more excited about it. This was the first time I was able to land an interview for a lab, and I was there to share myself. The interview wasn't so much about answering their questions. It was about me presenting the work I accomplished at LEGO. My passion for what I did was clearly received by the group. By the end of it, it felt like I had fun. It was very enjoyable to present something as mundane as metric analysis as an exciting accomplishment. Afterwards, I went to work at LEGO. On my way to the store, I got a phone call from HR. HR asked me how the interview went, and I said I thought it went great and I really enjoyed it. She said the lab felt the same and was prepared to give me an offer. I had a feeling I would get the offer, but I got an offer only 2 hours after the interview, and that was pretty crazy. I decided to stay at LEGO for 1 more month while being a lab tech so I could teach the next supervisor their duties as well as my data analysis if they wanted to follow up on it. I was incredibly happy as a microtech. My coworkers were always surprised when I said I had fun working there. Working 8 years in a job you don't like will make any decent job feel amazing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had direction and everything was going to work out. I consider myself incredibly lucky to have landed this job, but I have to give myself a little bit of credit. When we were hiring for a new tech, my manager and I were talking about the hiring process. I was looking through the resumes and I asked her why my resume was considered despite not having any research experience like the resumes here did. She told me she was so annoyed with how long HR was taking to filter the resumes and give them to her that she requested to receive all of them. After looking through them, my resume caught her eye. During this time, the lab was implementing some metric analysis and she needed help with that. Then, my following interview was apparently so good, they had to hire me. I really don't know where I'd be right now if I never went out drinking that night, if I never decided to help my LEGO manager, if I never decided to apply to GameStop, or if my lab manager was a bit more patient. I can only say how grateful I am to have this opportunity. This was a story about how I was able to move from a part-time retail job to a full-time microbiologist. Wait before you go to college. It's better to take time to structure a path. It doesn't have to be cemented, but it should have a strong foundation. What I want everyone to know is that you get what you put in. Yes, I was working a part-time retail job, but the effort that I put into it paid off. It's not about conducting your life to follow your passion. It's about finding your passion within your life. As we grow, our desires and interests change, and so does our passion. Many people start life thinking they need to follow their passions or obtain some dream job to be happy. It is actually that mindset that leads to unfulfillment and disappointment. I have friends that were living paycheck to paycheck, going to a job they hated. They passionately followed their hobbies on the side and then landed a career they love in a field they never even considered. No matter where you are in your life or what you want, give it 100% because it will pay off. If you don't have the drive to give 100%, then you need to change something. It might not be easy, but your future self will thank you for the struggles you endured. Thanks for watching. This was a deep personal topic that has really shaped who I am today. If you enjoyed this and found it helpful, consider subscribing for more finance and life topics from me. Share this with anyone who might need help on their journey because I know I did. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you all next time.